Really looking forward to our next fight at bantamweight, and yes, the Figueiredos are multiplying. We have Francisco Figueiredo making his UFC debut, coming in here off a draw with Jungle Fights, avenging a loss. Can you avenge a loss with a draw? We'll talk about that fight a little bit later on. But Francisco coming in here 11-3-1, and he's a really diverse striker. He can really bring it from both angles and throw a lot at you, really frustrating his opponents. He will be taking on Santa Fe, New Mexico's Jerome Rivera. And Matt, I don't know how Jerome Rivera feels about Lawrence Gowan coming in from Canada, stealing the Sticks main stage. But he has the nickname of the Renegade, and overall, he can definitely bring it in his own special way. In MMA, he's a jiu-jitsu practitioner. Styles make fights. What do you make of this one?
So this will be an interesting fight. We've gone back and sort of watched not the lesser Figueiredo, but just, other Figueiredo. And it is interesting. He fights in a very similar style to his brother Davison, but it's odd when you watch him. He's got weird kind of movement on the feet. And I say that as a way, and yes, he does mimic his brother, where he's sort of got that old-timey boxing stance where one of his arms out and the other one's back. But also, he'll mix it up and go orthodox and southpaw. And something that I bring it up a lot when we talk about how Kevin Lee's a great fighter. He's this great striker. He's a great wrestler. But Kevin Lee's a really good example of a guy who switches stances when he probably shouldn't. How when he's an orthodox fighter, he's really good, he can do everything. But when he goes into southpaw, his defense really takes a big hit. And for Francisco Figueiredo, he's got the opposite of that problem. From southpaw, he's actually really good defensively. He moves his feet a lot more, it seems. He's a lot more just sort of aware of the fight. Whereas when he is in the orthodox position, he's more power heavy. He will plant a little bit more. And something he does very similar to his brother. Davison Figueiredo's got that beautiful sort of pullback counter shot. It's very Conor McGregor-esque, where it's get my head out of range and then counter you with a shot, collapse all that distance. Francisco Figueiredo will go for that, but it's not like he has the same reaction time of his brother, and he doesn't really have the same power. Again, it's hard when you are comparing these two, because we're comparing a guy making his UFC debut with limited sample size out on him versus his brother, who is currently one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. But there are certain comparisons that you can make specifically between their styles. And it's not as contrasting as, let's say, a Herbert Burns and a Gilbert Burns, where you look at Gilbert and you're like, okay, well, that's like a guy who's already there. And Herbert, who they don't really fight in the same style. For all intents and purposes, Francisco Figueiredo does have a similar skill set to Davison. It's just he doesn't have the intangibles, where he doesn't have the overwhelming power or the overwhelming reaction time. He still does have sort of the foundation of his brother, but he doesn't have those real big X factors that put him over the top. And that last fight in the draw, weird fight, I think it's fair to say. Don't ever take Francisco Figueiredo down next to the cage. That's all I'm going to say.
It's a really weird fight, so let's go through it. Because, again, it was a draw, which is weird that you'd have a fighter in his last 5 fights, he's got a loss. And, again, we talked about avenging. It's a split decision loss to Eduardo Souza with Jungle Fights. It's for the belt at bantamweight. There's 3-round fights there because Walid Ismail says screw the other 2 rounds. So he loses the fight to Souza. That's almost 3.5 years ago. He beats Vitor Leandro, who's 6-12. Manuel dos Santos, 7-1. It's a salty 7-1. And then Souza again. You watch the fight, the first round's really close. And again, Figueiredo, when he's in southpaw, he throws a lot of great tie kicks. He'll go for your body. It's really good. When he goes from orthodox, he decides, I'm going to put them hands on him, and they're kind of labored. He tries to throw with a lot of power. He gets hit a lot himself. He's not very defensively sound from the orthodox stance. So in the first round, it's close, but again, I gave it to Figueiredo. If you gave it to Souza, you could make an argument either way. The second round, he decided to go all Augusto Sakai on everyone. Souza goes to take him down, and Figueiredo goes 2 hands onto the cage to grab it. For safety, for whatever. The referee automatically stops the fight, brings Figueiredo into the middle, and takes a point. So automatically you're down on the scorecards in that respect. I gave that round to Souza, so for me it was a 10-8. It was close, but to me, again, I had it for Souza. You can make an argument. The last round, I had it for Figueiredo. Again, continued to really put on a pace. He had Souza cut. I think it was in the second round into the third. The third, it started to pour down. He had some top control. He started to pull away a little bit. Again, they called this fight a draw. I had it, 28-28 with the second round of 10-8 for Souza and 2 10-9s for Figueiredo. Regardless, there's definitely a lot of holes from Francisco Figueiredo, and the last time he fought was a year and 3 months ago. Jerome Rivera, much more active. You look at his last 5 fights. He lost to Brandon Royval, where he was going up against the cage, or he got pushed up against the cage, broke his arm, things like that happen, I guess. Freak accident. Before that, a loss to Roberto Sanchez. Sanchez got a shot into the UFC off of that one. Obviously no longer in the UFC, but still a name nonetheless. Then Rivera really goes on a run. And I know we talked about it in his UFC debut against Tyson Am. He had a lot of demons in his past he had to kind of overcome, and now he's been a lot more active. He's still young, too, only 25 years old, almost 26. He beats Kendrick Latchman. He beats, Jean Perez, Kendrick Latchman. He beats Luis Rodriguez over on Contender Series. He's about a 2-1 favorite in that one. Punches his ticket into the UFC, fights Tyson Am, predictably loses on short notice. So, coming into this fight, there's a few things that I really want to accentuate. Francisco Figueiredo has all-right takedown defense. He has all-right wrestling. I wouldn't say he's a standout jiu-jitsu practitioner, but he can hold his own. He's a good striker.
He is a good striker.
But he's a lot better striker in southpaw than he is from orthodox. Jerome Rivera, more of a southpaw striker as well, if he does strike. But his striking's not a strong suit. His wrestling's not a strong suit. His jiu-jitsu definitely is. The weird thing that I've seen, and again, you can't boil it down into simplicities. Francisco Figueiredo, black belt in jiu-jitsu. Jerome Rivera, not a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Does that matter? Not necessarily. You look at certain high-level MMA fighters, they might not have a black belt in jiu-jitsu. That's not the be-all, end-all.
Khabib doesn't.
Khabib doesn't, exactly. For Francisco Figueiredo, he's got a black belt in Muay Thai. That's definitely going to help in this fight. He's gone this far in his MMA career. He's got, 15 pro fights? And, 15 pro fights. And he's never fought at flyweight before. Why at age 31, after over a year away, do you want to fight at flyweight? Well, yes, my brother fights at flyweight. Do I have to fight at flyweight? So if I decide to fight at lightweight, does Matt have to fight at lightweight? Is this how brothers work? I know...
We're like the Morris brothers in the NBA. Whatever tattoo you get, I have to get the same one.
On the scale of brothers, where do these guys fall? Are we Nick and Nate Diaz? Or are we like Dan and Jim Miller? Where are we at here?
They're the handle. No. Okay, Figueiredo, I do think there are positives. It is odd, though, that he is fighting at his brother's weight class. And I always think about this, and I think about the Shevchenkos as well. Your whole goal is to become champ. How do you become champ if your brother is currently the champ? And listen, maybe they get along different than Craig and I do, but I probably wouldn't fight Craig if he held a UFC belt. And again, this is a crazy world where Craig is holding a UFC belt and I'm currently rising the ranks to become said champion. But it always is odd. We do see this a lot, though. Guys who are champs outside of the UFC, they'll be a flyweight champ, or not flyweight, they'll be a bantamweight champ, they'll move down to flyweight, or they'll be a welterweight, move down. People always seem to pick the lighter weight class that they can make because they want to have the biggest advantage possible when they are at the biggest show available. So for Figueiredo, this is a fight where really everything's pointing in his direction from a promotional standpoint. You want Francisco Figueiredo to win this fight. For Jerome Rivera, it was a small sample size we were able to see of him in his last fight in the UFC. Fighting Tyson Am on a week's notice, though, UFC's not doing you any favors with that matchup, so you can't put a whole lot of stock into that. But Figueiredo is a very dangerous striker. He's got good power. He's got good head movement. And the fact that he can sting you with either hand, with kicks, with punches, he can switch stances, I like a lot from Figueiredo. Not saying I like his ceiling in the division long term, but I do like Figueiredo in this fight.
I wouldn't put any hard-earned money on this one whatsoever. If we talk about the odds, Rivera open a -125, now +116. For Figueiredo, open +105, now -142. So the lines have shifted. If you look at the Topology votes, it's two out of three are going with Rivera. 514 total votes, 67% Rivera. Majority have him to win by decision, 82%. I'm also going Figueiredo, but again, probably not one of the most confident picks on this card. Just based on that last performance, I've seen that he can kind of hang with a guy that wants to grapple, that wants to strike with a little bit of power. In Souza, how good Souza, I don't know. Figueiredo, if you look at it, and again, you want to talk about people that deserve UFC shots, Francisco Figueiredo is Devison's brother. Here's why he's here. Because, and again, not that this really matters, he's the 95th ranked regional bantamweight in Brazil. Just for context, if you want to go through those rankings, at number 38, there's a guy that's 8-10-1, and at number 66, there's a guy that's 10-11.
They don't mean anything, right? The Topology region.
This guy's ending up in the UFC. But Matt, we're both going with this guy that's ending up in the UFC in Francisco Figueiredo. Overall, really looking forward to this card. We got a great main event coming up between Michael Chiesa and Neil Magny. So Matt, keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say.
Let's get into it.